morning and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a good week last week and looking forward to another good week this week. I hope you planned out your week. I hope you have a plan for all the things you want to do this week and you're not going to be reactive during the week. This is a new thing for me. I think going into the spring and summer, I've always tried to do it, but I'm really focusing on intentional work, I think this summer. So we'll see how that plans out. Anyway, let's talk about the things that are new for Microsoft 365 developers and developers in this space. So the first thing I want to talk about is something I touched on last week. So if you listened to last week's weekly update, then you'll already know about this a little bit, but I did sort of say at the time I was going to put it into a blog post, and that I have. So what are we talking about? We're talking about updates to the Microsoft Teams guidance for people publishing things to the App Store. So if you have a Teams app, a Microsoft Teams app, or actually more generally now, this is expanding out really into a Microsoft 365 app because it includes things like the ability to put your things into Outlook. It also includes what is going to include Copilot plugins as well. So if you've got a Microsoft Teams App Store app and you're trying to get it into the App Store, there's validation, a process that you need to go through. It gets validated by Microsoft, so they check all these things about your app. Microsoft published guidance to kind of ensure the best possible chances of getting your app through the App Store process. And they've recently updated that guidance to include information about what to do for AI-based apps. So we can look at that now. I've written up this blog post about some of the big changes. There's really 4 main areas developers need to be aware of. You need to tell your users you're using AI-generated content. You mustn't create dodgy content, so like nothing harmful, nothing inappropriate, nothing offensive. Your app must have a way to include report harmful content. So you must have a button or a process or something that users can follow to report where AI generated content has gone wrong. And if that happens, if you do get a report of that content, you need to take timely action, whatever that means. Okay, so those are really the 4 things that you need to do. It's interesting. I think it's good in one sense. I kind of feel a bit conflicted about this. I think it's a good thing that Microsoft are adding this validation guidance, and it's a good thing that they are now checking it for apps on the way into the App Store. It's an important part of the validation process, I think, and it's good to see Microsoft react in this way. On the other hand, I do think Microsoft could have done a little bit more in the client in this area for third-party developers, for ISVs. If you look at the Copilot chat, that has that reporting feedback mechanism built right into the user interface. So if you look at Copilot chat, you'll notice that underneath every message, not only do you have a disclaimer about the content being generated, you have the thumbs up, thumbs down to be able to kind of report the content, rate the content. I would love for developers to be able to lean in to sort of on messages when you're sending messages through the various different SDKs and APIs that we have to send messages in Microsoft Teams. I would love to be able to kind of set a flag to say this was AI generated, and then have the UI in Teams show that somehow differently, show it in the same way that it does for Copilot chat, because then users get a consistent experience for what AI generated content is, regardless of whether it's come first party from Copilot or whether it's come third party from developers. That's not happening. That's just what I would like to see in my mind, but that's not happening, to be clear. Instead, the onus really is on the developer to implement their own solution here. Okay, so that's the first big thing. Next big thing that's happened is a GAing of what is it? It's Microsoft Teams AI-based messaging extension. So we've talked about this a bit before. This is a really smart idea, I think. Actually, it's kind of, I don't feel like it's used very much or talked about very much, but I think it's really cool. And what it gives you is, if you've already got an API and you've got a standard for that API, it might be Open API, or it might be something else. But you can make an Open API description of your of your API, which basically just describes the methods that it has and the parameters those methods take. Rather than you then writing a middle layer in messaging extensions to take in what the user is saying or doing and translating into API calls, you could just give that definition as part of the manifest, and Teams will kind of do the rest. Teams will create a messaging extension based off of that, allowing you to describe, in English, what all the calls are that you want to expose, what they're for, how to describe them, what the parameters are, and what the parameters do, and it will do the rest. It's really kind of smart. I like the idea of it. It's nice. It's good for kind of simple APIs. There's a whole blog post from the Microsoft Dev blogs that goes through a little bit of a walkthrough of whether it's right for you, and then if it is, how to use it. It's definitely one to look at if you've got a fairly simple API that's not super complicated, whether pulling data from the CRM, giving the weather, updating some status, doing a process. Have a look at this, because you might actually save yourself a ton of time, and not only a ton of time, a ton of code writing, and that's kind of important. As you realize this, the more and more code you write, and the more and more experience you get in development, the less and less code you want to be responsible for. So anything like this that takes responsibility and shifts it away, I think is really good. So absolutely check this one out. Especially if you're about to implement a project that has an API and you need to get it into a messaging extension, which by the way could also be for a Copilot. This works, a Copilot plugin. This works just fine here too. Okay, next up, Microsoft Graph API for SharePoint Pages is now generally available. We talked about SharePoint Pages a while ago. They're relatively new. When they came out, there was an API. I think it was a kind of fast follow thing from the launch. It is now fully GA. So there's a full, there's a proper API in the Microsoft Graph API stack for SharePoint Pages. It's got some support for various different web parts, not just text ones. There's a whole list in this blog post here. There's a video about what's new. This is cool. This is good to see. In general terms, this is one of those things where it's not, I wouldn't say it's hugely exciting. We've kind of been expecting it. We've had SharePoint Pages in beta, so it's not unexpected it's going into GA. But it's worth recognizing the amount of effort that takes behind the scenes at Microsoft to get something from beta to GA. And it's good to see that continues for all the things, even including the things that are not the new shiny things that have a Copilot badge on them. So I think that's important to see that stuff continues. And finally, a shout out for the European Collaboration Summit, which is coming up soon in Germany towards the end of May, the 14th to the 16th. But it's not a shout out from me, although I am obviously shouting it out to you. It's from Microsoft. There's a blog on the Microsoft blog post, the Microsoft 365 blog, and I didn't realize this. So I am speaking at this event, and I'm talking mostly about Azure Communication Services at this event. I didn't realize how much of a presence Microsoft are going to have at the European Collaboration Summit 2024. But they put out a blog post and they've listed, so they've got a top level, what is it, what's the content, and then look at these keynotes they're doing. They're doing 4 or 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 big keynotes, and then look at these Microsoft-led breakout sessions. They are doing a lot of stuff. So this is really interesting. I'm kind of really interested by this. I think it's great. I did not realize Microsoft had such a big presence at this event. I didn't realize they were sending so many people. I think this is really good. If this is the weird flip side of Microsoft holding kind of slightly fewer conferences, then I think it's a good thing. I think it's good to put effort into community-driven events. I'm glad to see so much Microsoft personnel, being given the opportunity to come here. I think it's really good. I don't know whether that is, all the politics and stuff that surrounds that, especially like these days with kind of travel being so restricted. But I think it's a really, really good thing. And it's good for the conference as well, because it draws other people in. Having that many Microsoft people, having access to that many Microsoft people is huge. So it's really, really good for the conference. It's good for attendees. It's another good reason to attend what is and has always been in the past a fantastic conference. So European Collab Summit 2024 in Germany. I believe tickets are still available, but I would be quick if I were you, because, it's a really popular one. Anyway, enough from me. Have a great week, whatever it is you're doing, and I'll speak to you again next time.